streets of rage with no consequence in the neon light. So beautiful tonight. The streets of rage with so much to say in the pale moonlight. Everything looks strange tonight.
What's up, hackers? Welcome to TTI Live. My name is Taggart, and today we have a lot of cool home lab stuff in store. But before we get to that, we're going to do the week in cyber news as always, kicking off with the active exploitation of ManageEngine's latest and greatest RCE, CVE 2022-47966. Basically, this isn't a new RCE, as the year in the CVE may suggest, but what is new is that attackers are actively using this to gain entry to targets. Rapid7 is reporting on active attack, and researchers, this was 2 days before researchers from Horizon 3 released public exploit code. So there are proofs of concept that are available, which means that the barrier to exploitation is extraordinarily low. Many researchers are confirming that active attack is going on. So if you use Zoho's ManageEngine products in your environment, get them patched. This CVE has been addressed in the latest updates, so please get them updated if you're responsible for those systems. Up next, we got to talk about yet another T-Mobile breach. Now, it's not so much that T-Mobile was breached again. I don't feel like dunking on any specific company for their cybersecurity woes. However, the nature of this particular issue is worth, I think, calling out, because we had kind of two of these back to back. So the way that 37 million T-Mobile customers' data was exposed this time was via an insecured or a misconfigured API. And this continues to be an issue. API security seems to just elude organizations, which is very confusing to me, because in a lot of ways, APIs should be easier to secure than web applications because there's less user interaction that you have to account for. I don't know. Maybe that's just the web developer and me talking, but APIs maybe are just ignored. They're like, oh, well, no users see it, so we don't have to secure it. That's not the case. Time and time again, we see that APIs are the vector by which information is disclosed. And so if you're responsible for APIs, you should get them assessed for their security disposition. And if you are developing an API, if you're not familiar with the secure coding practices, get familiar with the secure coding practices by looking them up on OWASP.org, the Open Web Application Security Project. You can learn about how to do proper secure coding for APIs from them. We had another API vulnerability, or another API disclosure, like this week, right? We had, I'm trying to remember, it wasn't the FAA, was it? Maybe it was. Social security numbers were dumped from yet another insecure API. And lastly, very quick news this week, but lastly, I wanted to talk about an update that we got about the Vice Society ransomware attack against the Los Angeles Unified School District. Obviously, that's close to home for me, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the fallout and the follow-up from this attack for a couple of reasons. So the first is the dwell time for the attackers. It turns out that the attackers were inside the LAUSD network between July 31st and September 3rd, 2022. So essentially a month, right? That is a pretty long dwell time for what we've seen. That's much longer than usually you would expect for a ransomware actor who's usually trying to get in and get the compromise done, exfiltrate the data as quickly as possible. A month is pretty long. Things that we now know were impacted were contractor information, including social security numbers and things of that nature. Of course, we know that student data was impacted. But one of the things that was interesting to me in this latest report was that it appeared as though, I'm trying to find the exact quote here. Yeah, it appears as though the entry point may have been from the Facility Services Division of Los Angeles Unified School District. So essentially, your facilities that may be sanitation, that may be maintenance and repair. And this is unsurprising to me because I've worked facilities in schools before. I have done that work. I have seen what goes on, and the truth is that a lot of those systems have to be computerized, but the staff that do them tend not to be the most technically literate. And that's okay, right? I mean, it's okay. Not everyone has to be a comp sci major in order to survive in this universe, but it is a problem when systems that they are given are not secured correctly. And I'm just talking about the management systems for facilities departments. Another aspect of that area of work that becomes very concerning is when they deploy systems to control things like heating and ventilation, right? And they're unaware of the security concerns that go with them. This is pretty common where you'll have a computer, like a smart HVAC system that has some sort of embedded controller. It has a web interface. It has a default password that never gets changed. It's on a flat network. You'll be able to see it. Or because an organization is paying somebody to manage that system, HVAC or whatever, it will have a port open to the internet, and that port is totally, default password, totally easy to get to, or there's some unpatched vulnerability that everyone is aware of or is easily discoverable, and it's never maintained. So, what am I trying to say? Don't neglect your facilities departments. They don't neglect you, right? They're taking care of you. They're making sure that the heat stays on. They're making sure that the water is running, and they're making sure that the trash is picked up. Make sure that their systems are secured so that you don't have to worry about having another Target-like incident where the HVAC system was actually the entry point for that particular attack, or a situation like what apparently happened at LAUSD, where it was the facility services that was the entry point. All right, news out of the way, we're going to get into our main material for today, which is we're going to install Splunk. For the longest time, I've been using the Elastic stack, Elastic, Logstash, Kibana, and the Elastic agent to create telemetry for devices that I spin up in the home lab. I do that for a lot of reasons. One, Elastic is open source. I can maintain that data for a long time, and it generally does what I need to do, and I've figured out how to do it easily. Why would I use Splunk then? I have a rule that whenever possible, whenever an open source option does the job equivalent to what a proprietary solution does, I will choose the open source option. Here's the thing. That's not the case here. There are some things that Splunk just does better, and not even close. Elastic does a lot of things very, very well. One of the things that it does very poorly, in my opinion, is search. And so from a threat hunting or incident response perspective, Elastic can be a real pain because it doesn't have the ability to search or parse or even reshape data dynamically the way that Splunk does. And I also think it's worth deploying Splunk in this lab or learning how to, because if you are interested in a defensive cybersecurity position, the odds are that you're going to be in an organization that is paying for their security information and event monitoring platform, and it's very likely that you're going to be using Splunk. So knowing a little bit about how Splunk is deployed, and of course knowing how to use it to find the data that you're looking for, is pretty valuable. So I think that coming up with a way of deploying Splunk inside of our lab, at least in a temporary state, is definitely worth our time. Let's get started. Okay, so here we are. I'm in the lab actually already. So just as a reminder, what does our lab look like? my lab is an HP ProLiant DL380P Gen 8, so it's not the newest machine ever, but it does great for me. In terms of specs, we're looking at 40 cores. I'm not touching anything like that. I'm only using 2 right now. I've only used 12 recently. And we're talking about, 64 gigs of RAM with room to grow on that. And I have 2 terabytes of space across two different RAIDs. And I'll talk about why that's true. I have a primary RAID of 1 terabyte where my most important stuff lives, and those are SSDs. So anything that I need high performance on my VMs, so the router, the jump box, my primary SIM, Kali, all the stuff that I know is going to get hammered, that lives on the SSD for fast I/O. I also have 2 1 terabyte spinning disks, and those are a little bit older, and I use those for my throwaway VMs that I don't need to be as performant, and I'm not worried if that data is lost. Both of those are Stripe RAID 1. So I have that that backup capability, but at the same time, I'm making decisions about where to put my VMs depending on how important they are to me. Okay, so let's get started with installing Splunk. When we're installing Splunk, we're kind of talking about at least two things. The Splunk indexer / search head and the forwarders. Forwarders are things that send data to indexers. Indexers are things that process data. Basically, those are the concepts that you need for Splunk. And it turns out that you can, in fact, install Splunk for free, at least as a trial. You will need to get a Splunk account on the Splunk.com website. Once you do that, though, and it's free to create an account, once you do, then you'll be able to download the Splunk Enterprise free trial. So you can go ahead. This is the link to go to that once you have an account. There will also be a link to free Splunk up at the top right on the website if you're looking for it. Now, if you know me, you know that I don't like going through all of the rigmarole of putting in your data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you the direct links for these download packages. Now, for our Splunk Enterprise build, we're going to install the server, the indexer, and the search head. We're going to install those on a Linux machine. Well, we're going to do it 2 ways, really, technically. We're going to do it the hard way, which is spinning up a VM and doing it that way. But then we're going to do it with Docker, which is way easier. But if you're going to install it bare metal to a VM, or not even bare metal, just raw to the VM without a container, then this is how we would do it. So we're going to do it on Linux. There's no need for it to be Windows. So we're going to go Linux here. And I'm going to, of course, choose my deb package because I'm using Ubuntu. So I'm going to download this, and then it actually gives you a wget command. What are the limitations of the perpetual free license? So we'll talk about that in just a second, okay? Let me get through the download here. So this wget is going to give you a direct link, I believe. It's a little bit funny. There it is. And I'm going to save that in my notes. Angel, good to see you. Orbital and HGB, pleasure as always. So that's all good. Let's make sure that works. And in fact, let's make sure that works by setting up a new Ubuntu server. So I'm going to do this manually first, and then we'll automate it at the end. So I'm going to clone my Ubuntu server 2204 base, and we'll call it SecLab Splunk. All right, that's good. Oh, I should have mentioned this is, of course, Proxmox as our hypervisor, for those of you who are seeing the home lab for the first time. Let me just check my hardware here. Everything looks good. I only need one network interface for this because I've really simplified my network topology. So I have firewall rules that allow my isolation lab to send data to specific hosts in my infrastructure network, and that's what this is. So this looks good. I am gonna kick the specs a little bit though. So I'm gonna give it 4 cores, and I'm gonna kick it to 8 gigs of RAM, just because Splunk does sometimes need a little bit more horsepower. All right, that looks good. Storage, 30 gigs is like, it's small, but it's fine for now. And if I need to, I can add additional storage. All right, let's fire that up. And we'll wait for that to launch. So let's talk about the limitations, what you can do with the Splunk free trial. So it's basically like this. The Splunk Enterprise, you get 60 days of indexing up to 500 megabytes per day. Which, if you're doing something like what we're doing, which is like using it for malware lab investigation, will be totally fine. And in fact, I never expect my Splunk instance to exist for longer than 60 days. Hey, Sohail, for trying labs, can we use Amazon AMIs? You can, but whenever you're setting up Amazon, AWS, or Azure VMs, make sure that your security rules, in the case of AWS, your security groups are well configured so that only traffic from sources you expect and trust are able to get in. So, especially for something like this, you want to make sure that SSH is accessible only from like your local IP, right? You're not allowing anything else from the rest of the internet unless you're specifically intending to make something public. That's a really important step in the configuration, and it's easy to miss. Also, for a 4-core 8 gig, it's not nothing, right? You're going to pay some money to keep that up and running. I don't know enough about the specific Splunk Marketplace images, Sohail, to know how they're configured. But I will say this, trust but verify, right? Never assume that the configurations that have been put in place for you are what you need. The reason we're doing this kind of manually is because we don't want to take any shortcuts. All right, so I'm gonna SSH into, well, actually, the first thing I'm gonna do is modify my hosts file on my jump box. Oh no, it's already set. Good, it picked up the same, IP address as it did before when I did the test for this. Great. All right, so SecLab Splunk is good, which means I'm gonna SSH to SecLab Splunk. There we go. And now we're going to run that wget command. Not too shabby, right? Now you're also going to need the Splunk Universal Forwarder. The Universal Forwarder is not going to go on the server that we're setting up, but it will go on any of the endpoints that you want to send logs. So for this, you're going to want the Windows as well as any other operating system package that you want to set up. So there's an MSI here for Windows. You want to grab that, and these are free to download as well, because these are like the agent, right? Think about it like this. They're like Elastic Agent, or they're like, you know what they're a lot like in terms of their configuration is Waza, if you're familiar with that. What we'll do is we'll download these, and then we will get them installed on any endpoints that we're testing, and then we can add sources for those forwarders to track. All right, so it looks like Splunk has been installed here. Or not installed, it's been downloaded. Let me zoom this in so the text is a little bit bigger for us. That's good. All right, so let's run, this is Debian, so we're going to do sudo dpackage-i, and we'll fire that up. All good. Take your time. All right, while this is going on, why don't we spin up our Splunk client, the Windows machine that we're going to add a forwarder to. So I just cloned this morning to get the license up and new. So I've got a Windows Workstation clone. We're going to clone this up and call this SecLab Client 1. Looks good. Are these agents extensible? Can you type code to add new text, tests, or get additional metrics? Don't think about it like that. The forwarder's job is to collect log data. Okay, so you can tell it many different kinds of logs to collect. What you do with those logs is where the extensibility comes in. And there are a lot of apps and plugins and extensions for Splunk that you can get from the App Store, which is called Splunk Base. So yes, but not in the direction that you're thinking about, Benny. Okay. SecLab client. Let's see. Let's check out our hardware. 2.4, that's fine. 1 network interface, and this is on the isolation network. That's fine. All that is good. Yeah. Let's bring this up. For all metrics to track like CPU, storage, RAM, we need to install the Splunk agent on all endpoints. Yes. In order to get data, you need the forwarder, right? Or like there are other ways to do it. You can set up what's called a heavy forwarder and use different kinds of forwarding, but the universal forwarder is the easiest way to do it, right? It is agent-based, which means that you have to install that agent on every endpoint that you want to collect data from. But once you do that, then the agent's configuration determines what telemetry it sends. And where it sends it to. So you can either send it directly to an indexer, or you can send it to a concentrator, known as a heavy forwarder, that will kind of collect all that data, process it, and send it later. Send it off to the indexer. Lone Star Cyber, welcome. Is this video recorded for viewing later? It is. It's going to be on YouTube 24 hours from now. And of course, it'll be recorded on Twitch right away. What are notables in Splunk? So, Heil, notables is pretty broad. Could you be more specific about what you're asking about? You're going to see the features as we go through it. All right, the Splunk install has been completed. Let's go over to opt Splunk, which is the default install location. And what you'll notice is that, actually, let's directly go to that directory. And look at the structure of this. Even if you never become a security engineer, even if you never have to set up one of these, I want you to be familiar, as I try to fix my autofocus, I want you to be familiar with the structure of Splunk, because that's just kind of who I am. I want to show you the nuts and bolts of things. And you may have a situation which you have to fix it. This is where you look. Do you happen to be associated with the Taggart Institute? I am the founder of the Taggart Institute. Yes, Lone Star. Husky Hacks and I are the founders of the Taggart Institute. C'est moi. Okay, so the structure here is very similar to like a Linux file system, right? We have an etc and we have a bin. The bin folder is where all of the binaries that this thing uses are going to live, and some of them are bundled. Be aware of that Splunk bundles its own stuff. Like, look, it has its own Python, it has its own wheel, right? It has its own Mongo. So just be aware that it has kind of a lot of its own stuff in there. All right, now we're ready to fire this thing up. We've installed it, and now we're ready to start Splunk Enterprise for the first time. Now you can just run Splunk Start, and that'll kind of walk you through everything that you need to do. And that's okay. But I want to also show you other start options, right? You can default accept the license, which is pretty good. And you can also I know there's a way to do this, to set up Splunk as a systemd. Yeah, run Splunk Enterprise as a systemd service. This is what you really want to do if you want to set it up to run in perpetuity. Oh, hey, chat. I may really start recommending you to my clients after the pentest debriefs. I've already recommended BNB clients with teams. Yeah, backdoors and breaches is like that. It's such a good, easy, out-of-the-box tabletop exercise. Yeah, so this is what you want to do. You run Splunk with enable boot start -systemd managed 1 and then give it the user in the group. They're optional, but if you don't, then the Splunk user in Splunk launch.conf is used. And then if it's not defined, the owner of the Splunk binary is used. So just be aware of that if you want to be careful of that. So if we look at what we have in here, that's going to be the Splunk user, which is like, it's fine because the Splunk user was created, but just be aware of that. So we can actually run this here, say Splunk enable boot start systemd managed 1, and then we'll leave everything else off because Splunk is fine. And now, look, because it's the first time we run this thing, it's going to say, hey, do you agree with the license? Yes, I do. And I failed because I had to run that thing as sudo, actually. So let's rerun that with sudo. I'm just using page down to get to the bottom of this agreement. Yeah. Now, this is where you have to enter an administrator username. This is kind of like the unlock password for how you can manage this thing later on. So you can set it to whatever you want. I said Splunk admin or something like that. Yes, I know about sudo bang bang token satori. I didn't feel like doing it. I felt like actually demonstrating the whole command. One of the things that you have to do is when you're teaching, you sometimes have to change what you do for clarity rather than efficiency. OreoBite, good to see ya. Happy 14 months. Incredible. Okay, so now you can see that Splunk is now part of Systemd. Okay, I don't think I need this. I don't think the music needs to go this hard. There we go. Okay. So it's running. Let's now see sudo systemctl status Splunk. What is it? Splunk D. What? There it is, capital S. So it's loaded and inactive. So we're going to sudo systemctl enable Splunk D, just to make sure that that's done. And then start Splunk D. Oh, it didn't like that. Oh, there we go. Now it's up and running. This, what I just did, is not how the Splunk documentation tells you to do it. So just be aware of that. But if you know from the outset, if you know from the outset that you want this thing to run as a systemd service, I think this is way easier. Set it up as a systemd service first, then when you bring Splunk up, you're ready to go, right? Now, there are some gotchas, though, which is that we didn't give it see, we're getting some errors here. If we try to go to Seclab Splunk on 8000, I don't know if it'll be up. Yeah, it's not up. And the reason is there were some additional options that we need to set. All right, so we're going to stop Splunk D. And we're going to run this manually. Splunk start. Oh. Interesting. Failed to run Splunk as Splunk OS user. This command can only be run as a Bootstrap user. Oh. Hold on. Let's become Splunk. That sucks. Okay, so looks like there's some permissions issues. Sohail asks, one of the NIST controls for AU controls that audit log capacity should always be efficient when Splunk Cloud Enterprise Security is used. Do you think we will ever face issue regarding running out of capacity for log storing? Yes, you will. You will absolutely. Like, not even a question. Yes, you absolutely will run into that problem, because if you're, depending on the size of your organization, but you will, because Splunk is collecting so much data by default, right? And it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you. The biggest cost, especially when you're paying for Splunk Enterprise, retention, I mean, it depends on how many endpoints Angel's correct, but in any organization of any scope, you will be fighting against your storage capacity, right? Just the way that those market dynamics work is that your limiting factor will be paying for storage, especially in the cloud. Orbital, thank you for the tier 1 sub to Token Satori. Very appreciated. Okay, so we're going to fix this. We're going to chown -R Splunk opt Splunk. Okay. There we go. So Splunk did run this time after we fixed those permissions issues. And now it's up. Now, interestingly, I didn't set a password, so I would have to reset the password, I'm pretty sure. Which is why they tell you to run Splunk for the first time. Nope, this is what I want to do. I want to set the reset the admin password. There we go. This is Splunk Phantom. I don't want to do that. I want to do... the Splunk admin is not the same thing, ForGuards. Splunk admin is for configuring stuff on the system, not the web admin. Yeah, sucks. Okay, so we could do something like this. We can do bin Splunk hash password. And what we'll do then is we will take that. And we will so notice how there's no admin here? Okay. Well, we'll try it. Yep, you are correct. My mistake. I thought that the Splunk admin was because you have to set it for the agents too. I thought that was just for on-system stuff. All right, well then we were good. We'll leave that alone. All right, so that's how you get Splunk up and running the hard way. I don't want a default dashboard. And there's search and reporting. I do not want a Tor. Okay, so now that we have this up and running, we want to be able to collect data. And we brought up the Windows machine here. So I'll client 1. How's this thing doing? Looks good. I am so curious if this new build does the thing that I was trying to do. I'm having a devil of a time getting my auto unattend to configure. Nope, not what I wanted to do. Ooh. Well, we can do it via PowerShell. Getting remote desktop to work out of the box. I have the commands in my setup to do it, but for whatever reason, it's not taking. But let's see here. Try RDP. New connection. I don't think so. Yeah, no. Okay. So, we'll SSH to it. And we will enable remote desktop. I really should just. Do I need the firewall rule set up too? That was it. Okay, so now I know I have to add the firewall rule. Hey, Blacktimus Prime, thank you so much for that sub. Really appreciate that. All right, we're in. The reason why I'm connecting over RDP this way is because I have the agent actually saved to my downloads folder here, and that got mounted as an external drive. Nerds. Let me try that again. Attach. Yeah, this. Now it's connected. And I have the Splunk Universal Forwarder configured. See, there it is. So I have a Splunk forwarder. Get out of here, OneDrive. Okay. and I'm going to just drop that on downloads. Now, there is a command line way to set up the universal forwarder. I want to go there. Install universal forwarder. The Splunk documentation is good, but difficult to navigate, which is why I have this tab stack here to keep it all nice and organized. So you can, in fact, do it from the command line. Just like so. But you also have a window setup. Now, this is so... Depending on how you're doing this, you may want to... Let me rephrase that. The question often comes up, do I put the Splunk Universal Forwarder on my golden image, or do I provision it later? I would say provision it later. It's a little bit more work in the provisioning setup, but it's worth doing, because then you won't get any confusions about, host names or anything else like that for how you're setting this up. So, as we'll see, setting up the forwarder actually takes some doing once you have it installed. The installation is really the easy part. Right, you can kind of see how this goes here, but we actually want to set the deployment server. Let's do it graphically, but then we'll also, for the next run, we'll demonstrate how to do it via the command line. So if we want to do it graphically, we just double click it. It's an MSI. It's really not hard at all. Okay, we accept the license agreement. We're using an on-premise Splunk Enterprise instance. This need not be the same as the one that you set before. Okay. Deployment server. This is a little tricky. We're not actually using a deployment server. A deployment server is an optional Splunk component that helps manage deployments of Splunk to all of your associated servers and then forwarders, things like that. We're not using one right now. We're just using the indexer and search head. So leave this blank. We are using a receiving indexer. We have one by default. And just to confirm that we have one, let's go into our Splunk instance here. And we're going to go to settings. And then we're going to go to forwarding and receiving. And if we go to configure receiving, what? No, none receiving. Well then, we will set one up. I thought there was going to be one. So make sure that you have one. I must have been thinking that the Docker version has one out of the box, which is nice and easy. Another reason that's kind of the preferred way to do that. Okay, so now we have a receiving port here. All good. And so we'll set this up. It is 192.168.99.101, and the default is 9997. So you can either fill this in or not if you haven't changed that port. Installation begins. Let me see if I can get you that. Do you want the universal forwarder? Here's that wget command. Okay. Now, this thing is configured, but it's not forwarding anything. Let's take a look at the installation location for Splunk here. We go to C, Program Files, Splunk Universal Forwarder, and then, very similar to what we saw before, we go to Etsy, System, Local. We will see an outputs.conf. Let's read that. With Notepad. Doesn't have to be that complicated. All right. So check this out. We have our outputs configured, right? A default group, auto load balancing group, whatever. This has all been configured for us, okay? This is where Splunk is configured to send data. So you can kind of see how this goes. First, you define TCP out, you define a default group. That's the stanza of the configuration. Then you configure a server for that group, and then you send that server. Yeah, you configure it here. Now, if there were any specific configs for that server, we don't have any specific configs for that server, so we're good. Now, that is where it is sending data, but what data is it sending? That is configured in a file called inputs.conf, which does not currently exist. So how do we solve that problem? We have to make it. Now, inputs.conf has documentation. There is a lot of it. So you might ask, okay, well, how do we even get started? Like, what do we do with all this? If we're doing a Windows machine, the easiest way to get started, I think, is to send Windows event logs. They're gonna be parsed by Splunk automatically anyway, so let's start there. Now, I have not yet installed Sysmon on this machine. I can. We can do that with Ansible. We'll do that in just a moment, but let's understand how we build the .conf spec. So first of all, there are a couple of things that you can set up in the inputs.conf immediately. So if you want to set the host, right, you can do that in inputs.conf. Let's open, hold on, view, file name extensions, thank you. Then new text document, inputs.conf. Okay. And we'll just open that with Notepad. Host equals seclab client 1. Okay, that's up first. And actually that needs to be in the default stanza. Okay. Now we're going to collect Windows event logs. We have a win event log global stanza. So if we go to Windows Event Logs, you kind of set one up for each log that you want to set, or each log name. So if we set up this one, or if we set up our first one, let's do security, right? And then under this, we put any of the configurations that we want for that specific log type. Now, I am going to put this in the index win event, which doesn't exist yet. To fix that, I'm going to go over to Splunk and make that index, my Splunk admin. Go settings, indexes. What are indexes? So indexes are ways of organizing your data, but they're also ways of separating your data for different kinds of processing. Okay, so you can see that we have some pre-existing, let me zoom in on this a little bit. We have some pre-existing indices for indexes here, none of which are useful to us for the incoming data. So I'm going to make a new index, call it win event. Okay, everything else is good. I'll leave pretty much everything as it is here. But if you wanted to configure max index sizes or where things get stored, you can do that as well. And is it a metrics type of index or is it events? In this case, it's events. Okay. There's win event. Very good. I'm also going to set up the source type. To be win event log. And I'm just configuring that so that that data point is filled. Because I may, for whatever reason, want to have win event logs in different kinds of indexes. In this case, no, but it's best practice to set up your source type. What else do we want? Let's look at the other options that we have for our inputs.conf here. Start from, we want to set this to oldest. In this case, to pull the latest data. Okay. And what else can we do? I think, what is it? Disabled, right? It's kind of funny. There's a disabled that you can set, which should be 0, which is the default. Yeah. So I think we should be good there. But if you want to be explicit about it, you can put in disabled equals 0. Okay. Let's save that. Actually, let's get the system logs too. Okay. And then I'm going to use my SSH session here to restart service. Splunk forwarder. Any questions about what we're doing so far? None questions, huh? Okay. Let's reload this. Hey, look. We now have 3.35 thousand events in the win event index. We go to search and reporting. if we search for index equals win event, my God, it's full of data. And look, it's already parsed. We have event codes. We have log names. We have the message raw. We have the process names. Oh, it's so good. Right out of the box. Do you have a go-to list of things you forward to the Splunk server every time I end up setting... I don't know what to include and what not to include. That's a really good question, Anu Breckton. So, it depends on the platform. So, for Windows, I am sending system... If I'm doing like a malware analysis, I'm trying to get as much data from everything as I possibly can, right? So, I'm going to do system security PowerShell logs, actually, which we haven't done yet, and sysmon logs. So I'm pulling everything, right? But if I am in a larger environment, I may have to be a little bit choosier, more I'm trying to think of the word. Choosier. Selective about what goes into the Splunk indexes, because I am limited by my storage and compute that I am paying for, right? And so then I have to think about retention. How long do I want to keep this data around? So I have to make some hard choices probably about what I care most about. So for example, do I collect security logs? I know this is going to sound crazy, but do I collect security logs from every endpoint? Or do I collect most of that information from the domain controllers? Right? Where I'm going to get authentication information, save that, and then do I collect other information from the endpoints? Another question. Do I mirror my EDR data into my SIM, or do I let that remain in my SIM dashboard? Or sorry, my EDR dashboard that is independent of Splunk, which is a problem because then we don't have a single pane of glass, right? But then I'm not duplicating my storage. It's more work for an analyst, but it saves you money. So there are some hard choices that you have to make about what you throw in there. But when I'm doing a lab like this, yes, that's my point. The issue will be correlation from a single point. But those are the hard choices that you often have to make when you're dealing with an actual budget, right? And also not just an individual budget, but it's probably the case that more than one team is responsible for managing these different applications. And you may not, as the security operator, you may not get to make the choice at the end of the day about everything that goes into your SIEM. Because keep in mind, Splunk is not first for security. Like, it does great stuff for security, but it is designed to collect logs. And that is an operations task, not specifically a security task. Hey, Doug, is this a Splunk standalone instance? Some kind of limited trial? Yeah, you get 60 days to play with Splunk for free with a limit of 500 megabytes of ingestion per day, which we're not going to even touch. So if we look at our settings, in case you're curious about that, you can go to the licensing and see how this goes. So right now, we're on our licensed daily volume. I've licensed 5 megs. I've used 1%, right? But notice also, I can change my license group, and this is where you start learning about what the different licenses do, right? So I can, if I want to pay, I see you're playing me a song, Orbital, I'll do it in a second. If I pay for Enterprise, I can level it up, right? There's a free license. Has no authentication or user and role management, and has a 500 megabyte a day daily indexing volume. So, if I wanted to set this up in a lab for longer term retention, and I was underneath that 500 meg a day limit, then I could still use that free license in perpetuity. The enterprise trial is time limited, but my use case here is to essentially bring it up for a malware investigation or like a specific lab, and then blow it away long before those 60 days are over. So I'm never going to worry about that. And it so far has been working okay for me. But there are, of course, some limitations, right? And if you do need to keep more data or keep it around for longer and you worry about authentication, things like that, then either pay for Splunk, which is expensive, or, you want to look at something like Elastic, which we already have a full configuration for setting up Elastic as your primary SIEM through our SecLab repo. Hey, Doug, thanks for that follow. Yeah, you do want to be careful. We're going to keep an eye on our indexing limits. So far, we're good. All right. Let me play this song for Orbital here, and then when we come back, we will deploy this a little bit more easily. All right.
All right, everything's looking good. I even had a song queued up for you. Extreme millennial energy here today. Some nights I stay up cashing in my bad luck. Some nights I call it a draw. Some nights I wish that my lips could build a castle. Some nights I wish they'd just fall off. But I still wake up, I still see your ghost. Oh Lord, I'm still not sure what I stand for. What do I stand for? What do I stand for? Most nights I don't know anymore. This is it, boys, this is war. What are you waiting for? Why don't we break the rules already? I was never one to believe the hype. Save that for the black and white. Try twice as hard, I'm half as light. Here they come again to jack my style, and that's alright. I found a monitor in my bed tonight. She stops my bones from wondering just who I am, who I am, who I am. Oh, who am I? Oh. Some nights I wish that this all would end, 'cause I could use some friends for a change. And some nights I'm scared you'll forget me again. Some nights I always win, I always win. But I still wake up, I still see your ghost. Oh Lord, I'm still not sure what I stand for. What do I stand for? What do I stand for? Most nights I don't know. So this is it. I sold my soul for this. I washed my hands of that for this. I missed my mom and dad for this. No, when I see stars, that's all they are. When I hear songs, they sound like a swan. So come on. So come on. Oh, come on. That is it, guys, that is all. 5 minutes in and I'm bored again. 10 years of this, I'm not sure if anybody understands. This is not for the folks at home. I'm sorry to leave, Mom, I had to go. Who the fuck wants to die alone, all dried up in the desert sun? My heart is breaking for my sister and the con that she called love. But when I look into my nephew's eyes, man, you wouldn't believe the most amazing things that can come from some terrible nights. Oh, oh, oh. The other night you wouldn't believe the dream I just had about you and me. I called you up, but we both agreed. For the best you didn't listen. For the best we kept our distance.
And we're back. All right. Thanks, Padawan. If I were smart, I would ditch this whole InfoSec thing and just play piano on Twitch all day. I think I'd do better. Collins, oh, thank you so much. That seems complicated and cold. All right. So yeah, we're gonna blow this whole thing away, and then we're gonna bring it back up with a little bit more of our automation. So down comes Splunk, and let's go over to, we'll exit out of this. All of this is going to go, including our victim. And the reason being is that I don't like all of the fiddly parts of this, right? It doesn't really seem like it's going to work for quick provisioning. Now, could we write an Ansible playbook to automate the provisioning of the Splunk server? Yes, and in fact, we will. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build an Ansible playbook for both the VM setup, like raw VM, and the Docker version. But I want to show you the Docker version now because Splunk has put some effort into making it easy. Okay. So, yeah, there it is. Splunk in Docker. Actually super easy. Splunk maintains both a Splunk Enterprise Docker image as well as a universal forwarder. But that is like wacky. I don't know why you would do that unless you for some reason wanted to just containerize the forwarder on a system. Like the whole point is that the forwarder is collecting logs from the system it's on, so you'd have to mount var log into the container anyway if you were doing it on Linux, and then on Windows it would be a whole other can of beans. I don't know why that would be useful for me, except the Docker. One thing that is interesting is that the Docker Splunk project it has its own documentation page, which is cool. And it turns out that all of it, you can set up a whole situation, a whole Splunk deployment with this thing called Splunk Ansible. I'm sorry, it's in light mode. I'm not logged in. All right, that's not terrible. Yeah, so Splunk Ansible is a collection of Ansible playbooks that are designed to make deploying and kind of ad hoc Splunk project easy. But it's not really going to work for my purposes because, as like Detection Lab, it's making a lot of assumptions about the way that the lab should be deployed, and I don't want to make those assumptions. I want my own assumptions, basically. And so I'm going to take what I've learned about this and make my own Ansible playbooks that we will put inside of SecLab. And if you're curious about what SecLab is, all of the work that we do in the home lab on these streams is saved inside of a GitHub repo, including the Packer scripts to build your templates, the Terraform plans to deploy specific lab scenarios, and all of the Ansible roles and playbooks that I build to configure systems after they've been spun up. So if you're interested in getting started with this, now these are for Proxmox specifically. Ansible will work wherever, but the Packer and Terraform components are Proxmox specific. That's why they're on the branch Proxmox. But okay, so let's talk about how the Docker Splunk works. It's a little bit tricky because if you just use the Docker Splunk command that they give you here, it won't work for the Universal Forwarder as we're using it. And I'm wondering if anyone can tell me why, just looking at that command. That's the entirety of it. We're setting the accept license, and we're setting the Splunk password there, which is nice. What's not going to work for our purposes here? No takers? This does not allow receiving. It's assuming that every universal forwarder, or every forwarder, that it cares about is going to be inside of the Docker network that you're creating here. But that is not true for us. So we actually have to add another -p argument for 9997 in order to send it to the indexer. That's it. But we do have to remember that step. So that's easy days. I already have a Docker host. It doesn't open the port expecting to send events. Exactly right, Collins. 100%. All right. I'm gonna bring down the SecLab Docker machine. And I'm gonna bring down client. And we're gonna blow them away. Whoa, no. That was wrong. Whew. Almost blew away the Docker host, which is not what I want to do. Okay, these two are what I want. Gone. Good. 108, off you go. And client 1. Off you go. Okay. So, We already have a Docker host set up. We've done so many Docker setups on this stream, I can't even count. But if you want to learn how to do it, simply look up the Ubuntu Docker setup. And in fact, SecLab has, now that I think about it, has a Docker role inside of it if you want to set it up with Ansible. This will do it. Boy, this inverted color thing from Vivaldi is weird. I don't hate it, but it is bizarre. But yeah, so this is the Ansible role that will ensure that Docker is installed on your system. And this one is specific to our environment where we use SecLab as kind of the management account across all of our VMs. Okay, so Splunk in Docker. Let's SSH to our Docker host. And let's do Docker container ls. Okay, cool. Iris is up and that's fine. So I'm actually already using port 8000, so that's no big deal. I'll just change this to a different port. And if I do Docker image ls, you'll see that I have quite a few things. Let me Docker image prune here. Okay. But one of the things that I have is Splunk. So I've already pulled this image, but if you don't have it, you would run Docker image pull Splunk /Splunk latest. Just like so. Right? And you can see that mine's already up to date. From there, we're going to build this command step by step. So Docker, I know that they have run here, but the more correct for the modern CLI is Docker container run. So Docker container run -d for detached mode port. So I'm going to do port quad 8 to 8000 because I'm already using port 8000 for Iris. And then another invocation of -p for 9997 to send my events. And then we're going to send set some environment variables. Splunk start args equals -- accept license. Another one is going to be Splunk password. I love that this is in plain text. Very cool. But that's fine. And then we're going to give it a name. And we'll call it Splunk latest is what we're running. Oh, I leadified it. Why did I do that? Okay. Docker container ls now shows us that Splunk is up, and it has a health check for us, which is really handy. So it is starting. It's not yet provisioned, but it's coming up. How we doing? Still starting. Shouldn't take too terribly long. Let me bring up VS Code. I'm like super zoomed in here. Yeah, we have to talk about Tailscale another time, but that's not today's project. Okay. So I'm going to modify my inventory a little bit. Splunk victim, call it Splunk client, as a Windows host. And yeah, all good. I don't really have to mess with much here, but I do want to start making a new role. Let me zoom this in so it's a little bit easier for everybody to see. I do want to start making a new role. So the first new role I'm going to make is going to be Splunk ES. So that's going to be the enterprise server. And that's going to need a tasks folder. And then a new file of main.yaml. Okay. So that's going to be our new Splunk enterprise server. And this is going to be the non-Docker flavor of it. We'll set that up. I'm just kind of prepping that for later. How's our container doing? It's healthy. Excellent. So now, if we go to seclab Docker quad 8, you can see I've done this before. Oh no! Oh, it defaulted to HTTPS. There we go. So it's up with the arguments that we provisioned, and we're in. How much easier was that? Right? That is the way to go. Now, I do notice that I'm seeing a lot more health issues. They go away, but I see intermittent health issues for Splunkd here. I haven't seen that really impact anything, though. Okay. Other differences for the containerized version, if I go to settings and forwarding and receiving, look, it already had 9997 configured as a listener, so that was just handy, right? So the Splunk, the Docker version of Splunk is a little bit more prepared out of the box for what we're trying to do. And that's kind of it. Like, that's it. We're up and running. Very little to do. And in fact, if we wanted to, since it's running in Docker, we could set a restart policy or whatever we wanted. We could save the data to an external volume if we wanted. All of that is possible, and that sort of solves all of the other rigmarole. So this, for me, for my lab purposes of trying to spin it up to do like specific detections or investigations or experiments, this is, I think, the way to go, as opposed to a VM and doing all of that. But we're gonna build both just in case, because as I said, sometimes Splunk can get a little bit resource greedy, and so obviously I'm not setting any limits at the moment on this container, so it has the ability to take whatever resources it can from the Docker host. But if I have other stuff going on that Docker host, maybe I want to separate my concerns a little bit. So something to think about. I could set up more Docker hosts if I wanted. That's also a possibility. Is there any reason to do this without Docker? No, there isn't. I can't think of one, so we're gonna just do that. Let's build that process then. Now that we know that we can do this, we can get this up. We'll do Docker container stop Splunk. Okay. And Docker container RM Splunk. Awesome. Very good. And then let's go full DevOps here, right? Let's make a Terraform plan to do this. So we're going to CP the Docker host to Splunk ES. Okay. And then we will... Yeah, really, I was disconnected from the Splunk server, you don't say. And then... CD into Splunk ES. Okay. Very good. All right, let's RM Terraform. Actually, yeah. Let's Terraform and let's remove the terraform.tf state. And then the proxmox log. We just have... Good. Okay. Now we're ready to build the Terraform plan. Close Ansible here, close Packer. Let's open Terraform. My stuff. Hey, Marimu. Okay, so we're going to change some of this here. First is our Proxmox provider, our Terraform provider is good. Telmate Proxmox is still, I still think it's at 2.9.11, right? Let's confirm that. Sorry for this silly question. I'm on the edge of my seat. Actually, I'm standing up, but... Yep, 2.9.11. We're still on the latest version. Okay, and what else do we need to change? So we're going to change the host name to SecLab Splunk. And in fact, I'll do that everywhere it shows up. And we're going to do that case sensitive because there's one that isn't the same. Okay. Change its name. And as I said, we're going to beef this up a little bit. Give it 4 cores, 8192. Can you tell me what I can do with this GitHub? There's a lot of environment, but how can I set that up with the YAML? Coder Kid, I think you need to check out the Home Lab videos on our YouTube channel to answer that question. In order to understand what they are doing, you need to understand, in order, Packer, Terraform, and Ansible. And because these are designed for Proxmox, if you want to use the Terraform and Packer components, you have to understand Proxmox or use Proxmox in your environment. So these are meant as a resource that go along with the videos that we've done about doing Home Lab. And in fact, if you look on our channel, there's a Home Lab playlist that kind of walks you through how the setup has gone. It's a lot of content. It's a lot of time, right? I understand that. But this is sort of like my live documentation. Someday I'll write a book about all this. Someday. Everything else looks good. The name is good. The clone, this is our base image, our base template that we built with Packer. That's good. We're going to connect. That looks good. Now we're going to set a net plan if we want for a static IP address. I don't think I need to do that. In this case, Yeah, because we don't need to set the... Yeah, we don't need to do that. We can actually remove this file. It's okay. We can let DHCP set the IP address. That's fine. But what we are doing, this provisioner, I don't like using provisioners in Terraform for much. But one thing I do like to use them for is to change host names. We'll also knock off the net plan apply. We don't need to do that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Okay. And so yeah, we're just basically changing the host name. And then we're reporting the VM's IP as an output just to confirm that we have that listed. And then we'll take that and drop it in our Etsy host. So this is our Terraform plan. And Terraform has already been configured via environment variables to work with Proxmox. So now that I have that set up, I can run tf init because I have to get the provider back. Okay, and then tf plan, just make sure everything looks good. It does. And then we'll run, tf, by the way, is an alias for Terraform that I set up. The Terraform is the actual command if you haven't set that. And then tf apply, and I'll do auto approve so I don't have to type yes again. You know what, let me close this pane so we have more window space. Hey, Christy. So what's happening now is Proxmox, or Terraform, is connecting to the hypervisor and building our new VM. See? There it is. It's coming up now. And that's happening just through our specification here. This is the way that I prefer to do things if I'm going to do them multiple times, right? As experiments, I'm happy to just point and click through the Proxmox interface. But if I know that I'm going to want to do this multiple times, I definitely want to have a Terraform plan that I can reproduce. While this is building, it shouldn't take that long. But we'll think about what do we need in order to create the Splunk Enterprise server role. Hey, Global Enjoy. Some of you wanted to learn Miss so far. Well, good news. So this video is going to be on YouTube in 24 hours. But it's going to be on Twitch immediately. So it is recorded, so you'll be able to check it out. And welcome. So first off, we're going to get the Docker image. Okay, and then this is where I start looking up 100 different Ansible pieces of documentations. Here we go. Right, so Docker image. I don't know, hold on a second. Let me just stack these right now, because I'm obviously going to... I'm obsessed, by the way, with Vivaldi tab management. It's so much nicer. So look, at my top level, I have just like these 5, but then I click into this and it's like, oh, I have all these. Yes, I tend to have a lot of tabs open, and so this makes it a little bit cleaner. I also have this cool thing over here where I have this like tab management, which is very nice, as well as closed tabs. Yeah. I'm really enjoying my Vivaldi adventure. So, the Docker image. You mean I don't have to separate all my groups of tabs into separate windows with Vivaldi? Neon. Buddy. Watch this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Are you ready for this? That's not helpful, really. But it is actually... I have used tiling 2 at once. And it has some like weird built-in stuff too, like transform 3D. This isn't useful in any meaningful way, but you can do it. If you want to turn it black and white, you can do that. You can invert the colors. Yeah, I use the two side. You know what I'd use the side-by-side thing? I've used it now for setting up the chapter time codes in YouTube after the YouTube video goes up. I'll have the description open in one tile in my YouTube settings, and I'll have the video playing in another tile, and kind of as I go through the video, I'm setting the time codes for them. Yeah, it's actually crazy handy to do that rather than have two separate windows. Okay, let's look at how we do this. So, source, pull. It's pretty much just going to be community ansible.community.docker.docker image, right? So name Splunk, and do we give it a tag? You would imagine so. Default is latest, so it's going to default to that, so that's fine. And okay, so that's it for the getting the image. And then the next task will be run Splunk container. Why Splunk? Why not? No, I'm doing Splunk specifically today because it is very prevalent in the cybersecurity industry. And as much as I love using open source tools, I love Elastic. I haven't played with Graylog, but I'm really interested to do so. But it is, I think, of value to explore this software, not only because it's so prevalent in the industry, but there are some things that Splunk does, I think, way better than Elastic, specifically search. The Splunk querying language is just so good at allowing you to parse through data and find what you're looking for. Elastic is great at collecting information and providing dashboards and automated learning. It's really cool at that. But that Lucene is just not as powerful, or even KQL, their KQL is not as powerful as Splunk's language for querying. And knowing how to do this, having an opportunity to explore Splunk in your own lab, I think is valuable, especially if you're trying to get started in this industry. You're probably going to use Splunk at one time or another. That's why. No brand loyalties, no masters, no gods. I mean, Elastic's cool. Like I said, there are things that Elastic does better, there are things that Splunk does better, in my opinion. It would be a bad idea to only learn one of them if you want to be a defender. Right. So Docker container. It's nice that it's a single container rather than Docker Compose. In this case. So what are we looking at here? Yeah, we're going to have to expose some ports. All right, so a little something. Actually, you know what? Can I? Let me do this. There we go. Okay. The name will be Splunk. The image is Splunk. Splunk? I can't... how did I do that? How did I type it correctly once and then not the second time? Okay. State. Started. Restart is true. And ports. We're going to expose... 8,000 to 8,000. And 9997 to 9997. You know what I like? I like that this mirrors how you would do it in a way in the Docker Compose. And then we're going to set some environment variables. What did we need to set? We needed to set... yeah. Or no. How does this work? Right. So Splunk start args. Accept license. And then Splunk password. We'll do Splunk password as a variable for reasons. Do we need anything else? No. That's it. Okay. So there's our... So there's our Splunk Enterprise Server with Docker role. And so then we need a playbook that uses it, right? Hey, look. Picked up the same IP address again. That's handy. And Terraform did our job. So this thing is set up already. Now let's... yeah, we can keep going and let's make the playbook. So, close out roles here. And we're going to make a new Splunk es.yaml. All right, so this is very similar to, if we look at how like the Elastic Elk Stack does, it looks like this. So this would be very similar that we do here. We're gonna install Splunk Enterprise Server. Okay, the host in this case is going to be SecLabs Splunk. Become use. Now, this part is kind of cool. So for roles, we're going to specify Docker, and then we specify Splunk ES. One thing though is we need nope, not from there. Not from there. I'm going to close all of this. Where's my Malware Lab machines? There we go. I needed vars prompt We're going to enter the Splunk admin password dynamically. And this one is going to be private. All good. God, the Splunk lint is such a pain. Fundamental question, what is Splunk? Splunk is a security information and events monitoring platform, or SIEM, or SIEM, depending on how you pronounce it. That is best, I think it's best described as a log aggregator that has a really powerful query language and visualization capabilities to allow you to understand your data and investigate incidents, which we're going to do once we have this all set up. All right, now that we have our become true and add a new line. Similar to Elk. Yes. Similar to Elk. Splunk is enterprise, it's proprietary software that has a trial, which is why we're allowed to do this here. And the reason why you want to do it is because this is what businesses often use, right? As much as I love open source software, and I do, it's important to understand this platform because it's so prevalent. And it's good at what it does. The Splunk query language is amazing. Although I have to say, the more I use Azure's KQL, the more I like it. Just for doing this kind of work, for a functional programming dork like me, KQL is just catnip. Can I give a tour? That's what we're doing. Just hang on. We're getting there. So impatient. Now that we have the Ansible playbook, we can deploy it. So we're going to do Ansible playbook. And we don't have to do that just yet. But what we will do is Ansible playbook inventory.yaml. The inventory we already set up. If you remember, we set up SecLab. Oh, my bad. Let's add SecLab Splunk to our infrastructure. And then we're good. This should just run. But before I do that, I do want to confirm that the host name changed. It did. Wonderful. I love it when Terraform does its job. All right, so Ansible playbook -i inventory.yaml, and then we give it the Splunk es.yaml. That's the playbook that it's going to run. And then it asks for the Splunk admin password, which I definitely just typoed. All right, and then we're off to the races. It will install because I gave it the Docker role first. It will confirm that Docker is installed first, and then it will set up Splunk ES. That is the sequencing of that, and that's why we have those roles in that order. I like to build most of this based on roles so that I don't have to, I can modularize these, right? I have a lot of Lego bricks here, and I can make a bunch of different cool, mostly spaceships, let's be honest, but make a lot of cool different models with them. Right? So now we're installing, it's gone through, it's added the Docker GPG key, it's added the Docker repo, now it's installing Docker components. All right, while that's going, why don't we think about what the playbook for installing the universal forwarder would look like. And this is going to be a little bit trickier. If we think about what the universal forwarder needs to do, we need to install it, obviously, which is on Linux simple, and then on Windows slightly trickier. And then we need to configure it. We need to set up the inputs.conf, right? And it's even stranger because we'll have to confirm that the Splunk user is set up correctly on Linux. Linux, it's a huge pain, to be honest with you. Windows, it's actually much easier to do. Let's start working through it, though. Just kind of... Why are you yelling at me? What's your problem? Trailing spaces. Not anymore, I just fixed you. No more spaces here, buddy. Okay, whatever. Let's close this. Okay. Let's make a new role. For the UF. And then new folder. Tasks. And then new file. Main.yaml. Okay. Now we know that we're going to kind of do two different things here. One for Windows, one for... HGB asked a while ago, I'm sorry I didn't answer this, what is my preferred distribution for installation? The answer is Ubuntu. Why? I've pretty much done all of my Linux stuff. I've worked with Red Hat, I've worked with CentOS, I've worked with SUSE, I've worked with Debian, I've worked with Arch. Ubuntu feels like home to me. For me, it's the distribution that makes the most sense to me, and just the way that it's configured. I don't feel as comfortable in an RPM environment, so for that reason, I deploy all of my stuff in the lab, unless I'm specifically testing something like Red Hat or CentOS or whatever. I'm going to do it all Ubuntu. Nice and stable. It really hasn't ever steered me wrong. Okay, so up first is going to be install UF on Windows. So the reason we're going to do this is we are going to have two separate tasks depending on. So is it Ansible? I know I have this somewhere. Yep. See, I knew I had it somewhere. In Sysmon. Perfect. So our URL here is going to be the MSI link that we the MSI link that I grabbed before. so that we don't have to go through that whole process. Call that Splunk UF. Okay. This is actually pretty close to what I want to do. So I'm going to open that to the side here. Get URL, and then... Actually, this can't be just this. Download UFMSI. When... Go to my roles, Malware Lab. Or no, Malware Lab machines should have it. Yes. When? That. So this only happens when the OS family is Windows, right? How's our playbook doing? Okay, so if we did everything right, Splunk should be up. And it should be up on port 8000 because we... Well, crap. What went wrong? Oh no, something's not right here. Because notice it said install... It didn't run the Splunk play. Why is that true? Is it possible that I didn't save? The playbook before I ran it? I hope not. That would be annoying. Luckily, this will go much quicker. What is happening? Oh, yep, nope, there it is. No, that's not the right one. Splunk, yes. Oh, wait a second. No, hold on a second. Roles, Splunky-esque. Oh no, the main.yaml's in the wrong place. There we go. Let's try that again. Oh, come on. Better? Better. All right, let's see what happens now. Yeah, Ansible's a little fiddly, but it does make the automation of these different things that you want to pull up faster over time. There's some initial setup. State is present, but all the following are missing. Source. Oh, okay. Source. Whole. I think that's right. All right. While that's doing that, I have questions about installing Windows MSIs. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So did this fail? No. Now it's pulling the Splunk Docker image. Great. So this is done. Okay, so now we'll do install UF Windows. Okay. And this is going to be ansible.windows.win package. Okay. Let's go check out some of our options here. Okay, so the path is kind of the most important part, which we've set up. And now that we've done that, we actually have to go back to the Splunk documentation to look at what we can do in terms of command line arguments. So we want agree to license, set the Splunk username, and also we want to set the deployment server, which is probably the most important part, right? So we agree to license. So how do we set these arguments? Just like that. Okay. So we'll do arguments and then agree to license equals yes. And we'll quote these just for sanity. And then Splunk use I don't think we need the /quiet. That's a default if we're running it this way. We do, however, need the deployment server. No, my bad. We don't need the deployment server. We need the receiving indexer. That's what we need. The receiving indexer is going to be the Splunk server IP, which we will this is quoted. Okay. Do we need anything else? I think we can leave the admin password off. Yeah, that's good here. But then we will need to set up the inputs.conf the same way that we did before. Rescue Dog Leo, thank you for the follow, and Lord Devilish as well. Very appreciative. Hey Ansible, how you doing? Now it's running the Splunk container. There we go. I even typed the password correctly. So we now have an Ansible playbook that successfully launches the Splunk Enterprise server. We have ports listening. Somewhat tangentially, how would you recommend setting up an economic sim for a smaller business? Can you quantify smaller, Sparwall? I think that, and it depends, like 30 employees. How many people are in the security or ops team? One to five. Okay. I think Splunk's probably going to be a little bit too rich for your blood at that point. I wouldn't recommend going with Splunk. I would, depending on your deployment, I would, however, look first. With that kind of staff, you want to find a balance between budget and management. So you can go all open source and save a lot of money. Yeah, hold on Security Onion. So you can go open source and save a lot of money, but when something goes wrong, you have to have the support, you have to have the chops on staff to fix it. And if you don't, then now you just have a broken tool that nobody can use. I used to be the guy that said, no, you should just deploy the open source tool and then figure it out. I was wrong. Because basically, very few people have time for that. And it's difficult to have the talent on staff to support it. If you do, that's fantastic. Make sure you also have documentation so that the next group of people can do it as well as you did. So if you have, rock star administrators that are willing to support an open source solution long term, Security Onion is worth looking at. The Elastic Stack is worth looking at. I really like the Elastic Container Project. But I also think it's worth your time to talk to, maybe, depending on how much Windows stuff you deploy, talk to Microsoft about your options for Azure. I'm not a shill for Microsoft, but offloading that labor for managing the SIM to Azure and then having all your data go to Sentinel may be worth it for you. And then you'll have a very powerful interface for your data. And depending on how remote you are, that may be useful as well. And it may also be useful if you're going toward like Azure Active Directory, things like that. You are going to have some cloud native stuff in your logging anyway. And so if you can concentrate all of it there, it's entirely possible. So maybe knowing the administrator, some people have different skills and what they're ready to do or how motivated they can be make a big difference on a small team. That's exactly what I'm saying. The tool you choose has to work with your team. But it also has to work, it's not just your team in its present state. It has to be the team as it will look in the future, meaning you never want to be don't be the person who's like, well, I can deploy this because I can support it. That's a really, really bad idea. But you also don't want to assume that anybody else can do what your team has done unless you have instituted a process to guarantee that those skills will be present on your team in perpetuity. Meaning, you've got a training pipeline, or you're hiring in such a way that you know for sure that you can have that talent. But if it's just something you're doing on a flyer, right, and you decide, oh, I want to have this thing, and then you don't have a long-term plan for how to support it, you're in trouble. And by the way, I'm saying this because I've been guilty of this in the past, right? I have definitely been the guy who has been like, well, I've deployed this whiz-bang thing, and it's okay if you don't understand it. I do. That sucks. Don't be that person, right? I learned from that mistake, for sure. You have to think in a longer time frame, and you have to think about what other folks are capable of doing. And that is where sometimes spending money is better than spending time. As I get older, I know which one is more valuable to me, right? And, like, there are a lot of things I'd rather have than money. There's nothing I'd rather have than time. Okay, so Splunk is up. By the way, while we're here, if you want more apps, you can click Find More Apps and go play in Splunk Base and have some fun. These are cool. Right? There's MITRE ATT&CK. If you're running any of these other tools, Threat Intel can be fun. Right? You can enrich your data with these other sources. You can configure them here. Vuln scanners. Wow. That's cool, right? So you have these different capabilities, but notice that there's more than just security stuff, right? Splunk is not just for security. So just be aware of that. Okay. Where are we now? We're ready to deploy some. All right, we're doing this. We're creating the universal forwarder. So, receiving indexer. This looks good. And again, we'll need this when. And then we have another problem, which is we need to configure our inputs.conf, right, on this Windows system. It'll be true on the Linux systems as well. We need to configure our inputs.conf, and we want to do that programmatically. How do we do that? Well, in Ansible, we have the templates capability. Where we can specify a template. So it's going to look a little bit like this. Inputs conf. To make this happen, we're going to set up a new folder called templates. And inside of this, we're going to make a new file and call it inputs win.conf.j2. because it's a Jinja template technically. So our source is going to be inputs win.conf.j2. Our destination is going to be C users, C program files, Splunk universal forwarder, I think, Etsy system local inputs.conf. And we don't need to worry about the destined owner here, I don't think. And we don't need to notify. Actually, we do. For this. So we'll get to notifies in a second. Notifies are tasks that trigger after something has happened. So once this is done, then we will trigger a new task, and that'll be in a different folder here. Okay, but again, we'll need the win or the when. Is there any benefit to running the Splunk server on Windows versus Linux besides supportability by admins? I don't think so, R. Lacoste. I really don't. As a matter of fact, I can think of a lot of shortcomings to doing it. Yeah, the only thing I can think of is like easier Active Directory integration if you care about that for how you access the server. But other than that, ugh. There's a lot of my bias in there. For me, it's like if it's a headless machine, you have to argue to my mind, if it's a headless server, you have to argue against it being Linux rather than argue for. It is that the operating system is designed to do that thing. It is very good at doing that thing. And using Windows for that feels like it's, unless it's a specific Windows service, it's like not fit for purpose. There's all this other crap on there that doesn't belong on a server. And I don't understand why you would do it unless you're not comfortable with Linux. And in that case, do what you got to do. But all else being equal, no, I think the servers belong on Linux. Especially because of all the tuning you can do with it, right? All right, so this is going to be the Windows version of this. Now, how do we do this for Linux? I'm going to sort of reproduce this whole thing for our Linux. So it's Ansible.builtin in this case. .get URL. The URL we're going to go grab again from what I pulled before. Okay. The destination. You know what? We'll just drop it at temp. SplunkES.deb. There's no reason to be crazy about it. And Ansible family equals Ubuntu, I believe, is going to be our OS family in this case. All right, so that's kind of our first part. And then we have to install UFO. For that, we'll go back to our Ansible documentation. Ansible.built-in. There is a depackage selections module. No, not what I want. Package. Ah, come on. No. All right, it might not be in built-in, in which case we'll have to go to... Does apt do it? Oh, it does. Okay, cool. Wonderful. So for that, we'll just use, that's built-in, right? That's Ansible.built-in. Yep, apt. Okay. So we will say name install UF deb. Oh, I forgot. We're going to remove the installer file for Windows. Yeah. There we go. And then, now that we've got the Windows stuff sorted, let's sort out the Linux. Install ufdeb. Yeah. Ansible.builtin.apt. The deb is going to be temp splunk.es.deb. And that creates a Splunk user, which is part of what we want to do. Yeah, that is right. It creates a Splunk user. We'll see where that goes for now. But I'm gonna leave this here for now because we have the Windows bones of it, and that's really what I want. So I'm gonna leave this here for now. Okay, and we'll make a new playbook. Or no, sorry, we're not quite finished. We have to finish the inputs here. So our default is going to be like this. And then host name, I guess we won't set the host name for now. But we will set the Win events, right? Let's go back to our Universal Forwarder documentation to confirm we got that right. Inputs.conf. Windows event log monitoring. Yeah, so win event log like so. Win event log. Security. Okay, disabled equals 0. Start from equals oldest. Oh, right, and we wanted source type, or index. Index equals win event, and then the source type equals win event log. Great. Now, we're gonna drop that in for system. We're gonna drop that in for, and then here come the fun ones. Microsoft, Windows, PowerShell, operational, and Sysmon. So that's our template. For our inputs.conf. And we don't need to worry about our outputs.conf because the installer will take care of it for us in this case. So this looks pretty good to me. Yeah. All right. Now that we have that role set. Hey, Jay Chiara, thank you so much for the follow. Now that we have that sorted. Too many blank lines. I'm going to say that it's not. Okay. All right, now that we have that sorted, we can go ahead and make a new playbook. Because we just made the role, right? But the roles and playbooks are slightly different. So in this case, we'll call this split client 1. We don't need the vars here. Actually, we do need one. We need the Splunk server IP, right? Yes, we need the Splunk server IP. That's what we're going to prompt for. Okay. And come true. Choose. We'll leave that off. And then our roles will be, you'll like this, Sysmon and Splunk UF. So it guarantees that Sysmon is installed, because that's a thing we can do. Because we have a Sysmon role. See how these things start to get put together? And then we install the Universal Forwarder. Okay. There was one thing that we needed to do. yeah, whatever. We registered. Or no, we notified restart UF win. So because we have that notify, there's a thing that we need to do next, which is I'm trying to think, where do I have one of these? Handlers. There we go. So we're going to make a new folder called handlers. File main.yaml. And what do handlers do? In this case, we're going to restart. Okay. And we actually have to have the name match, is the way this works. As crazy as that is. Okay. So, going back to our Ansible documentation on Windows. I believe there is a Win service module, and we're going to restart it. Just like so. And the name, if you remember from our SSH, was like I think it was just Splunk Forwarder. Okay. This looks good. So we're finally ready to deploy this thing. Let's go over to Starbase and bring up a new Windows machine. We'll clone this. Splunk Client 1. Come on up. Hey, how was everybody's week? Hope it was not too crazy, not too stressful. Very crazy and a little stressful. That was similar to mine. I like how Fridays guarantee a red ball at this point. By the way, am I the only person in the universe who uses that terminology? I fell into it when we have like a high severity or a high priority incident. I call it a red ball off of a Minority Report. It's useful. Feral Mark asks, are you able to NAT on Proxmox? I tried it on ESXi, but I couldn't connect machines to a DC. What direction are you trying to go? I know for sure you can get out from a local network on ESXi to a broader domain. You can definitely do that. But yeah, so the way that I have this is a good question. So the way that I have the networking set up for this machine, for the hypervisor is on my local network, and that's where the management interface lives. So this is my 192.168.1. That's my home LAN. Okay. And I have a bridge, a Linux vBridge, that allows me to add virtual interfaces on my home LAN if I want to. So if I go to Starbase and go to network, right? So I have the VMBR. This is the Linux bridge. This is the one that allows me to do exactly that. Okay. I then have two virtual Open vSwitch. These are just virtual switches. Okay, and they have their own subnets, 192.168.99 and 10.1.99. Those are my two. This is my infrastructure subnet, and this is my lab subnet, right? So anything that I need to stick around for a long time goes here. Ephemeral stuff or things I want to isolate go here. Both of these are handled via my router. So what I have is I have an OpenSense router that has 3 NICs on it. NIC 1 is bound to that Linux bridge, so I have access to the home LAN, right? So it itself has an out to the internet. Then I have these 2 NICs here. And so everything that I deploy, really, other than the router in the lab, in the hypervisor, is going to live on one of those 2 virtual switches and uses this router as a gateway. And so, yes, NAT is very possible. So, for example, I have is this the free version of Proxmox? Yes, it is. So, for example, right now. See how I am 192.168.1.52? This remote desktop connection you're currently looking at, which is my jump box, I have configured my router to NAT RDP through itself and into the jump box, because that's where I want RDP to go. So that's how I'm doing network address translation. So it's definitely possible. All right, so the client is up. It has an IP address, I hope. Yeah. Okay. And let us close a bunch of this stuff here. Splunk US. There's Splunk UF. Oh, host Splunk client 1. Yeah, that's good. We know that works now. Inventory. Splunk client 1 is good. So now I just have to add that to my Etsy hosts. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, I think we're good. So let's try that. We're going to do Ansible playbook, inventory, Splunk UF for the universal forwarder. Enter Splunk server IP. So what is our Splunk server IP? Right, 192.168.99.101. That's not private. I should fix that. I gotta... Interesting. So for now, I'm gonna knock off the become. And might as well knock off this private while I'm at it. Hold on. There we go. While it's doing that, I better set up the right index because this is a new server, right? So I'm gonna go to indexes and add the win event index that I'm about to use. Otherwise, I'll get yelled at. All good though. Now that will be going to win event correctly. I hope. Sysmon, I'm pretty confident on, right? We know that works. By the way, once this is all said and done, maybe not today, but once this is all said and done, I will show you how to parse Sysmon for Linux logs in Splunk. It's actually, that is something Elastic does better right now, but it's not impossible. One thing that Splunk does have that's really cool is an interactive field extractor. So you can look at sample events and then you can basically dynamically create regular expressions to extract field data from your log samples. That is a great helper. Okay, so Sysmon is installed. Now we're going to download the Universal Forwarder, I hope. This thing's cooking, so it's definitely doing some work. All right, so it downloaded it. Now it's installing. This is, I have, like, if I have concerns about any of the commands, it's right here. Because the MSI arguments were new to me. Still doing that install. Did it need the quiet argument? It's nowhere in the instructions, so that seems like no. Nope, yep, just went fine. And then install the inputs config. Did we get it in one? That would be cool. We're skipping the deb, and then we're running the handler. Restart Windows Splunk UF service, right? So that restarts the Splunk forwarder service. Okay. Got him. And now we have events coming in. All right. So now let's take a look at how this thing works. Unfortunately, there is no... So if I go to apps and search and reporting, which is I'm in, there's supposed to be a dark mode, but it's not really here yet. If I go to SPL editor, there's a dark theme for the SPL editor, but not for the whole interface, unfortunately. So if I wanted to, I could use my little inverter here. I don't really want to do that. I don't like using Dark Reader, before anyone yells at me about that. I don't like using Dark Reader because they advertise, they hype up the Honey extension, and I don't like anything that advertises stuff that I know for sure gives away your personal information. Honey is gross. Do not use the Honey extension. Don't let your family use the Honey extension. All right, so index equals win event. What you got for me? 371 events. Let's do some cool splunkage here. So we'll do time chart count by event code use null equals false. Oh yeah. I feel like I forgot no, there's no way I forgot a sysmon step. That's in the role. The config should be good. Look at that. Pulling all these in. Let's do this a little bit more clean. Let's do stats count by event code. And then sort minus count. Oh, hey, look. There are sysmon logs coming in. So let's just get our sysmon stuff. Let's do event code equals 1, table, time, command line. Is that not right? Ooh, no, these are not sysmon logs. I know for a fact the sysmon install works, so what did I forget to do? Maybe forget to restart the server. That should be part of the deal, but the other thing that's possible is that I I whiffed on the template, right? Microsoft Windows Sysmon operational. That looks good to me. We don't, PowerShell might not be there either, so let's see. No event codes 1 or 4104 either. But we do, obviously our system and security logs are coming in, so that's nice. Okay. Microsoft Windows PowerShell operational, and it's Sysmon operational. I wonder if there's like a parsing issue, like maybe the the PowerShell logs are the thing that we did differently, right? So I wonder if that was a problem. What is happening here? This is a weird thing. Yeah, see, despite whatever I did before, like, that wasn't set up, and I don't know why. Alright, well, we're remoting in now. And let's just see, was I impatient? Do we have data? Still just 4 events. Let's see. Get service. So let's see. Sysmon 64 is obviously running, and the Splunk forwarder, which we got right, is good. So that service restart should have been fine. We're going to look at the Windows Event Viewer here. just to confirm that the logs that we think are happening. I wonder if the PowerShell isn't enabled, and that's why it's an issue. Come on. But even without this, so if we do, let's say 4624s, right? Pretty cool, where we can just query for this, and then over here we can see our account domains. None of these are going to be particularly useful, but in this situation, but we can do the logon process, the process name, and of course, what we really want is the account name. So if we wanted to see logons by time, we could do time chart by account name. Count, my bad. Count by account. Let's do a span of 1 minute. Zoom in a little bit here. And we can do, let's say, a bar chart. All right, so now we can kind of see the number of logins per user over time. Kind of cool, right? This is why I like Splunk. It's so fast to do stuff like this, where like you can do it in Elastic, but it takes forever comparatively. There's other stuff that Elastic does way better, but this, I feel like Splunk has the edge. Okay. These are not the logs that I want, right? Because these are Windows PowerShell. I actually want Microsoft Windows. PowerShell operational. Yeah, I want those. and I got the name right. Microsoft-Windows.PowerShell. And then Sysmon. Definitely we have stuff, right? A lot of file creates, some network connections, DNS queries. So there's stuff in here. I wonder if we're just waiting for it. Do I ever use Phantom? I don't. I'm not familiar with Splunk Phantom. Oh, so that's interesting. These are all from Event Log System. Yeah. Hold on, let's pull that out. So we have 3 sources. Oh, interesting. So check this out. We have some PowerShell. Let's take a look at that. What do we have from PowerShell? Not the event codes I would have expected. It is I mean, are we just waiting for... No, health is good. Wonder if it's a time thing. Oh, yeah, there it is. Look at that. Some of these are in the future. Let's try this again. There we go. So look at our source now. There's our Sysmon stuff. From 5 a.m. Yeah, see? This thinks it's tonight. But we have the data, which is cool, right? So now that we know that we have this, we can do something like event code equals 1. By the way, I could jump to saying event code equals 1, but by specifying the source here first, it actually makes the query faster. If you write your Splunk query from broad to narrow, it is able to slice more efficiently because it's saying, okay, I'm going for everything in the win event index. Then, okay, I'm going to look for source before parsing anything else more difficult than that. Then event code. So, like, it's easier to make this happen this way. And then event code equals 1. Let's get these. 479. Now, how are these parsed? I have command line, parent command line, parent image. So now I know that I have these parsed fields, so I can do table time. Actually, let me do reverse to get them in chronological order. Then table time command line process ID parent command line parent process ID. Yeah. Off you go. This is why we use Splunk. The finickiness of doing this on Elastic is significant, whereas I can just fire the. Now I'm fluent in Splunk, so I'm able to do this quickly, but I can just fire this off and have it format my table for me based on my parameters here. I love that. The less that I have to point and click, the better. Also, not for nothing, this Splunk machine is exactly as powerful as the Elastic machines that I've spun up in the past, but it is so much more performant. Just the UI is more responsive. And I don't know if that's because it's more lightweight or if it's because it's not using Java, but it's something. And so it's much more pleasing to me to set this up. And this also, now, take a look. This is kind of why I love doing this. We haven't deployed any malware on this system, right? None at all. If you're a new analyst, does this start to look really scary to you? Look at this. We've got a base 64 encoded command here. What is this? Let's look for encoded command. Right, Angel, you know that. You know that a lot of management systems use file as payloads. But I'm saying and then we'll do a little where here. Where match command line encoded. Let's do one of those. So we're matching the field command line on the pattern encoded just to see what we get here. So what is this? Huh? Let's CyberChef it up. There's a reason I'm using CyberChef instead of the command line for this, by the way. I really don't like that DuckDuckGo gives me the wrong CyberChef. Yeah, that's the one it should be giving me. Okay. from base 64. Remove null bytes. chcp.com. So this would be Ansible doing its thing, right? So indeed, a lot of management systems like Ansible use fileless payloads. But if you're not aware of that, you're going to look at this and freak out. So one of the things, before you even deploy malware, one of the things you can and should do in your Splunk environment, if you build one like this, take some time and read the baseline. Learn what a regular system does and how often it does it. Right? It works. By the way, we can see the MSI exec installations. You can see them happen right here. And then what happens afterward? Now Splunk is going to start making a bunch of noise. And you have to be aware of that. Right? Oh no, a command execution. iCackles, what's happening? It's Splunk doing its thing. So like I said, you just have to be aware. Yes, Angel, your point is well taken. There is data here to understand that it's normal. The bigger point is that understanding the baseline is something that new analysts have to do. And getting comfortable with reading all of the fields and understanding what is normal, what is not, and cross-referencing with databases like Encyclopedia. This is a fantastic resource if you're not familiar with it. Where you can search for things like, what if it has CHCP in here? Yep, there it is. Change code page. So we expect this to run, right? Very nice. And it has the hashes and things like this. This, by the way, is why the fact that this exists is why I don't put hashes on WTF bins. Searching back in history for hosts would be a good starting point. In general, that's true, Angel, but in this particular situation, there is no history. This is a brand new lab, right? So the point is, if you're spinning up a brand new lab here, you're working from a new baseline. Although, yes, you're correct. Global prevalence is very important when you're doing threat hunting or incident response. If you see something that's suspicious, the first question you should ask is, how often has it shown up in the past? Yeah, we refer to that as global prevalence. Okay, so let's kind of review what we've done so far today. We have installed Splunk both raw on a virtual machine, and we've installed it through Docker. Docker being the much easier way to do it, and that's the way that we wrote our Ansible playbook to install the Splunk Enterprise Server. We modified the configuration from what Splunk tells us to do in Docker to expose port 9997 so that we can install the Universal Forwarder. We installed the Universal Forwarder on our Windows host, and we even wrote an Ansible playbook to do exactly that. We're also setting up to make sure that Sysmon is there as well. And so, we now have the capability of using Splunk instead of Elastic as our SIM layer if we were doing like a malware analysis lab. And so the things that are left to do, some extra cleanup, is to do the Linux installation. That's going to be a little finicky. So I'll leave that as either an exercise for the reader, or I will be doing that offline and add that to the Git repo. But we're pretty much ready to rock here, which I think is exciting. I will, for malware analysis sessions for the next little bit, I'm gonna do this instead of doing Elastic, just to see how it feels, how much differently it works, and whether I like the deployment. My suspicion is that I will, just because I'm super familiar with Splunk. I like the way that it presents data, but I do want to try both out now that I've been doing the Elastic stuff for a while. So I think that's going to do it for today. A lot of good work got done. We learned a lot, or at least I certainly did. I hope you did. And let's see, is there anybody else who is streaming right now? Oh, Nova's on. Well, yeah, Nova's on. So let's go ahead and give Nova our love. She deserves it. But I will be back on Wednesday. One more song before you go. Oh, if you insist, Neon. Sure, do it. Laz, this is definitely available as a VOD. And it's also going to be available on YouTube. Oh god, Neon and Oreo Bite, both its songs. Alright. Sheesh. Alright. I had one prepped for today.
All right. Let's see. What am I feeling like doing? Okay. All right, we'll do a midnight song, and then we'll do an Iron and Wine, then we'll do a midnight song. Oh, Oreo Bite has a third. All right, jeez. Actually, Oreo Bite, question for you. Would you be willing to accept a really complicated song as 2 for 1? All right. We'll end with that then. All right, we'll do the midnight song then we'll do the Oreo Bite special. I've been so low, felt the wind blow like a screen door in a thunderstorm. Yeah, I've been down, I've been laid out, but you always were what I came here for. Waiting all day just for my sake, for a bell to ring, for the first sting. Yeah, I've been blue, ain't nothing new. It's you, my friend, you're why I get up again. I've made mistakes and I've been hard hit. I say, so what? So what if I did? I'm the clear ride, I'm the comeback kid. Been a rough year, there've been some tough tears. I lost so fast all that I had. When it's time to, I'll fight for you, 'cause you know you are, you're why I've come so far. I've made mistakes and I've been hard hit. I say so what? So what if I did? I'm the clear ride, I'm the comeback kid. Starting over again. I'm the clear ride, I'm the comeback kid. I've made mistakes and I've been hard hit. I say so what? So what if I did? I'm the clear ride, I'm the comeback kid. All right. Let's see how this goes. Some folks like to get away, take a holiday from the neighborhood. Have a flight to Miami Beach or to Hollywood. Me, I'm taking a Greyhound on the Hudson River line. I'm in a New York state of mind. I've seen all the movie stars in their fancy cars and their limousines. Been high in the Rockies, under the evergreens. I know what I'm needing, and I don't want to waste more time. I'm in a New York state of mind. It was so easy living day by day, out of touch with the rhythm and blues. Well, now I need a little give and take. The New York Times, Daily News, oh, comes down fine with me, 'cause I've let it slide. Don't care if it's Chinatown or Riverside. I don't have any reasons, I've left them all behind. I'm in a New York state of mind. I'm just taking a Greyhound on the Hudson River line. 'Cause I'm in a New York state of mind.
All right, hopefully that was worth it. So, all right, so I think we're ready to say goodnight or goodbye or whatever time of day it is for you. Yeah, no, it's still streaming. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and get this raid going. As I said, I'll be back on Wednesday, maybe doing some programming stuff. Until next time, friends, please be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and happy hacking. I'll see you next time.